Jimmy Hyams, how are you, sir?
Dave, I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Let me ask you this. I'll put the over-under at 15.5. How many times have you been asked if Nico is going to play this week?
Over.
easy over. Yeah, I have too. I did a radio show in Memphis, by the way. I gave Caleb a shout out because it's one of his favorite radio stations, but I was asked that as well. And let's just go ahead and dive right into it because I'm gonna go with the over as well. The show represented by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com. It's our poll question. It's pretty simple. It has to do with Nico Iamaleava.
Today's tough question. Take a side. Take a stand. The Dave Hooker Show, a presentation of offthehooksports.com.
All right, Jimmy, I'll just ask you just point blank. Will Nico play on Saturday? If you had to bet a mortgage payment, where would you go?
First off, I wouldn't bet a mortgage payment, but I do think he's going to play. But it's just a guess. I don't know. Tennessee's playing it close to the vest. I don't want to say anything. They're giving every indication that he is going to play. Now, we all know that concussions vary. You can be fine in 24 hours, and maybe it takes you 24 days. There's no one size fits all for a concussion. So that's what makes it so difficult to project. And I know somebody said, what are the symptoms? Well, the symptoms are dizziness. If you can't follow somebody when they do their finger like this, if you have headaches, if you're having difficulty answering questions like, what is your name? There are a lot of symptoms of a concussion. So I've been there. I know it. I had a bunch of them in high school, so I know what that's like. But again, they're all different. Now, I'll say this. Do I think he had a concussion? I think. I don't know. I think. Do I also think he hurt his shoulder? Yes. So I think it's both. And I also think if he plays against Georgia, he's not going to be 100%, in part because of the shoulder. But if I had to bet, which I wouldn't, I would say he's going to play.
Caleb will bet on anything. So, Caleb, would you bet that he's going to play?
I actually wouldn't at this point. And Dave, I'll let you lead this, but should we bring up the reports from two credible sources across two different networks from what we heard yesterday?
Let's do that. So Adam Sparks reported that he was at practice yesterday, Jimmy. And then you've got the Bear, who I don't know how newsworthy that is, the guy on ESPN's College Game Day, saying that he's got from a good source that he won't play. But again, that's a guy that goes by the Bear. So you take that for what it's worth. Pete Thamel, who I do respect greatly, he reported on Twitter that he's in concussion protocol and it is still up in the air. Now, even Caleb doesn't know this because I talked to somebody right before the show. I was told that he has passed the preliminary protocols in terms of a concussion and that it's likely to play. But Jimmy, I'm like you. I wouldn't bet my mortgage on it.
Yeah, and it's the element of the unknown. And like I said, all these concussions are different. And typically, if you've had one, the second one could be worse. Just look at Tua Tagovailoa. Okay, that's a pretty good example out there. But we just don't know the extent of this. And Tennessee said it held Nico out for precautionary measures against Mississippi State. Okay. Does that mean he could have gone back in the game? I don't know if that's what it means. But I just think it's hard to project this, and you're not going to get any answers. Look, I'm going to guess that when the availability report comes out Wednesday night, that it's going to say probable. That's my guess. Now, if he's not on it at all, that means that he should play. But we also know that thing changes from Wednesday to Thursday to Friday to 90 minutes before kickoff. We'll know he won't play if he's not on the plane and goes. But if I'm Tennessee, whether he's playing or not, he's on the plane. Because I don't want Georgia to have any additional advantage in regard to whether he plays or not.
All right, Caleb, I want you to jump in here. Portions of the program brought to you by our friends of Hound Dogs of Knoxville. Champions look good in orange. HDKnoxville.com. HDKnoxville.com. Caleb?
Jimmy, so I want to go through each of these. Like, I want to quote these verbatim who we just brought up, and I want to play the Bear clip for you. And then I just want to know who you think is the most credible of these, because we know Josh Heupel doesn't have a history of telling the truth on injuries.
No.
So,
no coaches do.
that is true. So Heupel says Monday, Nico was at practice with us. We expect him on Saturday. But then he says, wait till the injury report. Pete Thamel comes in. He also said that Gaston Moore had been taking first team reps. Then Pete Thamel comes out. His exact tweet was, Nico Iamaleava is in concussion protocol. He did dress in practice on Tuesday, and his status for Georgia is undetermined. Now, this is what I'm going to go ahead and pull up what the Bears said real quick. His actual name is Chris Fallica, and he is a gambling expert. So he
used to be on ESPN.
Yeah, he did. He did used to be on ESPN. Yeah. And for those who are curious, if anybody has inside info, it might be him, because his whole shtick is gambling, and we've wondered why Vegas set the line for Tennessee, Georgia at 10. This is what he said just yesterday.
And that being said, I don't know what you have heard about Nico Iamaleava playing this week. I have heard that it was a bad concussion, and people that I've spoken to do not believe that he is going to play. We'll see what happens. Josh Heupel certainly offered a different tune, as you would expect him to do early in the week, to probably just have Georgia prepare as if Nico were going to play, have the college football playoff selection committee prepare to rank them as they were going to have their starting quarterback for this game. So, I mean, look, maybe my intel is wrong, and maybe he is fine, and hopefully for his sake and the health of him in the long-term future, I hope that it wasn't a bad concussion.
So,
Jimmy, that doesn't exude confidence to me, the Bears report.
You mean confidence in him?
Confidence in his report. It was kind of like he danced around. He kind of said, if my intel could be wrong and that sort of thing. I came up working for you. You were my mentor, and I've never heard you dance around something quite like he did. I don't know how much stock I put in that, in other words.
Okay, so you don't have confidence in his report, in him, what he's saying. Okay,
correct.
I don't either. Okay, so I know who this guy is. I followed him on ESPN. Pretty much every year when he was doing the odds and picking the spread, he was below 500. Most of the time he was below 40%. I also thought, well, he's not very good at that. And then I saw him doing horse racing. And there was a Kentucky Derby, and he picked the top 4 horses, and none of them finished in the top 4. So I don't have a lot of faith
Jimmy
in it.
just totally tears down the Bears mantra.
He just put the Bear down.
If his picking of the spread is any worse than his reporting, I don't trust him. And why would he know something that we don't? So I don't put any stock in what he said. I do
because
think
he had the so intelligent Jim Donnan on his podcast, and we know.
Speaking of somebody that's suffering from concussion-like symptoms, Jim Donnan.
Well, back to your question, I would trust Pete Thamel more. Now, I will say this: because Nico's at practice doesn't mean he practiced. Okay. So you got to pay attention closely to the wording. He was at practice. So what? That doesn't mean he practiced. So that doesn't give you any clue at all, in my opinion. So this could end up being a game time decision where Tennessee, 90 minutes before the game, declares whether he's in or out. But I'm not going to sit here and profess to know how severe, how significant the concussion was. I don't know. And I bet you there's only a handful of people that do know. And I would bet you none of them are in the media.
I would go so far as to say this, Jimmy. I don't know that Josh Heupel or Nico knows as of right now.
I would tend to agree with you because he's got a clear concussion protocol. Now, who has to clear him? It's usually team doctors. And in rare occasions, team doctors are not going to put their reputation on the line most of the time. Now, I've questioned sometimes if you work for an NFL team and there's so many dollars on the line, you might have some fudging going on there. They certainly did it with CTE, right, years ago. Mm-hmm. But I know who Tennessee's team doctors are. I think they're above board, and I don't think they're going to risk Nico's health by playing him if they know he should or is under concussion protocol.
Jimmy, It's been if we want to talk about Tua, who has gone through this concussion situation, 3 times now. I think a lot of that is his decision whether or not to play, and it's my understanding that he makes $165 million. If the NFL or the Miami Dolphins say he can no longer play, he doesn't make that money if he pulls himself out. But if I'm Josh Heupel too, I know this is a big game. I know it could determine whether or not they make the college football playoff, but you wouldn't want your reputation as a recruiter. And I know I always go back to recruiting. Of worst case scenario, he goes out there, takes a hit, and he's stumbling off the field and looks like Tua's look. That would be bad for the Vols.
No, I think you're right. I think it would be a recruiting, something in recruiting that would be used by opponents of Tennessee. Look what they did to their quarterback. Look how they handled him. Now, in the NFL, you can get away with it, right? Because you're not recruiting, you're drafting. But, yeah, I think that's a fair point because you know that their teams will be out there. Now, would that change the mind of McIntyre, who's committed to him? Would it change the mind of the quarterback the next year that's committed to him? What's his name, Faison? I don't know, but you know that schools would use that in recruiting against Tennessee. The Tennessee doesn't care about their players. It doesn't matter how hurt you are. They're going to roll you out there and play you. But to me, that's not under consideration. What should be under consideration is Nico healthy enough to play? If he's still in concussion protocol, he should not play, and there should not be any gray area about this. He either is ready to play or he's not.
Caleb, I want you to take over here. Jimmy's appearance brought to you by our friends at Varner Ford.
2024 Ford Maverick XLT all-wheel drive, $31,990. 23 Ford Expedition 4x4 Limited, $66,590. 2023 Ford F-150 XLT Super Crew 4x4, $47,995. Varner.
All right, Caleb, go.
All right, so Jimmy, we talked about this with John yesterday, and I just want to throw this out there. I think I lean your way too that Nico Iamaleava is probably going to play. If he doesn't, can Tennessee still beat Georgia with Gaston Moore quarterback?
No. I know that a lot of people were all excited about the way Gaston Moore played against Mississippi State in the second half. The best thing he did was draw pass interference penalties. What he throw?
By underthrowing passes.
He threw for 38 yards. Remember the first play against Alabama? He threw an interception into coverage. I think he is a serviceable backup quarterback who could beat Mississippi State and some other teams on their schedule. He's not going to go to Athens and beat Georgia. So I would be shocked if he did. So I would give Tennessee very little chance to beat Georgia with Gaston Moore. And look, there's a reason he's a backup. He's still a walk-on, isn't he?
Technically, yes.
I believe so, yeah.
So I know that there's some people that want to look at signs and say, hey, look what he did. I mean, he did this against Mississippi State. And remember, Mississippi State's the worst team in the SEC with the worst defense in the SEC. So that didn't really move the needle for me.
It didn't me either. And I've heard the same thing that you have, but people saying, oh, he played pretty well. I didn't see that. I don't know if some people watched a different game than me. I just thought he played fine. I didn't see anything that made me believe he could go to Athens. Let me play devil's advocate just for the sake of it, Jimmy. This team can run the football at a high level. This team has an elite defense. Mm-hmm. Those two things tend to travel. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to say that, even though I agree with you, that's the way that Tennessee can beat Georgia with Gaston Moore.
It would be. It would be. Now, I'll say this. In my opinion, if Gaston Moore is the quarterback, Georgia does not have to respect the passing game as much. Therefore, they can load the box. And they're still pretty good against the run. They're not as good as they've been, but they only give up 110 yards per game. If Tennessee gets 110 yards rushing against Georgia, they got no chance. But I'll go back to this. Georgia's not going to give you numbers in the box if Gaston Moore's the quarterback. They're going to take their chances with some single coverage. And I don't know how much zone or man they're going to play. Typically, play man. But if you can't throw the football and you can't be a threat in the passing game, then it makes it that much harder to run the football, doesn't it? So you're right. Defense travels, run game travels typically. but I think it only travels if you got a quarterback that's a passing threat.
I say what, if I'm Georgia, I'm preparing to stop the run, even if Nico trots out there, because
I agree with that.
I'm going to challenge him to beat me in the passing game, because I think the only way I can lose if Nico is not 100%, let's say it's shoulder and he passes protocol, is with the running game, whether or not it's Gaston or a banged up Nico.
Yeah, I agree with you. Georgia's number one priority defensively is to stop the run, to try to make Tennessee one-dimensional. And I think we would agree in the passing game, Nico's a bigger threat. And with his legs, he's a bigger threat than Gaston Moore. Now, I'll say this. I don't expect a whole lot of points in this game either. I think this is going to be a defensive battle. What was the Georgia-Kentucky score? 13-12?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we'll see many more points than that. Because I don't think Carson Beck's playing worth a flip, and I don't know that Nico's going to be that effective even if he does play. So I'm looking for a low-scoring game.